Story 1. The Parrot's Warning. In the quiet suburbs of a small Midwestern town, where the glow of streetlights bathed orderly lawns in a soft amber hue, lived Daniel Harper, a man in his late 40s who carried the weight of loss with quiet dignity. 2 years ago, Daniel's world had shifted irrevocably when his father George passed away at 70. George had been a man of simple passions, none greater than his love for parrots. At 50, after a lifetime of dreaming, he'd welcomed an African gray named Kevin into their family home. A bird whose sharp intelligence and vibrant personality quickly became his father's closest companion. George spent his retirement teaching Kevin an impressive vocabulary. Words like hello, what's up, food, and thank you. Each imbued with meaning, the bird seemed to grasp with uncanny precision. Kevin wasn't just a pet, he was a living testament to George's patience and joy. When George died, the question of Kevin's future hung heavy over Daniel and his siblings. His brother Mark and sister Ellen were quick to dismiss the idea of taking the bird. Their spouses balked at the noise, the mess, the responsibility. But for Daniel, letting Kevin go to a stranger felt like severing one of the last threads connecting him to his father. He was Dad's best friend, Daniel would say, his voice catching. So he brought Kevin to his modest single-story home, placing the bird's ornate cage in the den. A cozy room lined with bookshelves and a worn leather recliner where Daniel spent his evenings. The den, the lowest level of the house, became Kevin's domain. By day, the parrot was a chatterbox, squawking and mimicking phrases with theatrical flair, especially in the early hours. By night, he grew quiet, as if respecting the stillness of the house. When Kevin's chatter grew too lively, Daniel would drape a soft blanket over the cage, a signal for calm that the bird obeyed without fail. For 2 years, Daniel and Kevin settled into a rhythm. Daniel, a logistics manager with a demanding schedule, found solace in the bird's presence. He'd watch TV in the den each night, the flicker of the screen casting shadows across Kevin's cage, keeping the bird company until 10 p.m., when he'd retreat to his bedroom, leaving Kevin to sleep. Daniel had learned the parrot's habits intimately, when he was hungry, when he was playful, when he was out of sorts. So when something disrupted that rhythm, Daniel noticed immediately. It was a frigid December night, the kind where the wind howled through bare trees and the stars seemed sharper against the inky sky. Daniel had gone to bed early, exhausted from a long day at work. He slept with his bedroom door open, a habit born of living alone in a house that creaked and groaned with age. He needed to hear any unusual sounds, though in truth he rarely did. Around 11 p.m., a noise pierced the silence, a sharp, insistent squawk from the den. Daniel stirred, groggy, assuming Kevin was just restless. But the squawking continued, relentless, unlike anything Daniel had heard from the bird at this hour. Kevin was a creature of routine, and this was no ordinary outburst. Something was wrong. Heart pounding, Daniel slipped out of bed, his bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. He grabbed a flashlight from his nightstand and moved cautiously toward the den, the house's familiar shadows now looming with an unfamiliar menace. The squawking grew louder as he descended the short hallway, Kevin's voice cycling through his repertoire. "Hello, what's up? Kevin!" Each word laced with a frantic edge. In the den, Daniel found the parrot wide awake, perched low in his cage, his gray feathers puffed out, his head bobbing wildly as if caught in a frenzied dance. The bird's eyes locked onto Daniel's, and he kept squawking, undeterred by his owner's presence. "Hey, buddy, what's got you so worked up?" Daniel murmured, his voice soft but unsteady. He offered Kevin a handful of seeds, but the bird ignored them, continuing his agitated dance. Daniel draped the blanket over the cage, hoping the darkness would soothe him, but the squawking persisted, muffled but unyielding. Unease settled in Daniel's chest. He stepped into the kitchen to grab a glass of water, trying to shake the feeling that something was off. As he stood by the sink, the squawking suddenly intensified, sharp and piercing even through the blanket. Daniel froze. Then he heard it, a faint rustle, like fabric brushing against wood, coming from the pantry closet just beyond the den. The pantry was a small space, its door fitted with a large frosted glass panel that caught the dim light from the den. Daniel's pulse quickened. He crept toward the closet, his flashlight beam cutting through the shadows. The rustle came again, unmistakable now, followed by a soft thud, as if something, or someone, had shifted inside. Kevin's squawking reached a fever pitch, the bird's distress mirroring Daniel's rising fear. He hovered his hand over the light switch outside the pantry, his breath shallow. With a flick, the light snapped on, and through the frosted glass, Daniel saw it. The unmistakable silhouette of a human figure, crouched and motionless. Adrenaline surged through him. Fight or flight kicked in, and Daniel chose fight. He yanked the door open, a primal yell tearing from his throat as he lunged forward. Inside was a man, gaunt, disheveled, in his 50s, his clothes tattered and reeking of sweat and desperation. The intruder's eyes widened in panic, but Daniel was faster. He grabbed the man by the collar, dragging him out and slamming him to the floor. The stranger fought back, flailing wildly, his hands clawing at Daniel's face. But Daniel's fear had hardened into rage. He pinned the man down, his forearm pressing against the intruder's throat in a makeshift chokehold. "Who are you? Why are you in my house?" Daniel roared, his voice shaking with fury. The man gasped, his words incoherent, his breath sour. Behind them, Kevin was a whirlwind of noise, his cage rattling as he shrieked and flapped. The struggle lasted only moments, but it felt like an eternity. When the man's resistance weakened, Daniel sprinted to the kitchen, grabbed his phone, and dialed 911, never taking his eyes off the intruder. He kept him pinned until the police arrived, their flashing lights painting the den in red and blue. The man, identified only as a homeless drifter, had no ID, no belongings, nothing to his name. He'd broken into the house through a loose window in the garage, seeking food. The pantry was a mess. Jars of peanut butter smeared open, boxes of cookies and crackers torn apart, cans dented and scattered. As the police hauled the man away, Daniel sank into his recliner, his hands trembling. Kevin had finally quieted, his head tilted as if watching his owner with knowing eyes. The realization hit Daniel like a wave. If it hadn't been for Kevin's relentless squawking, the intruder might have slipped through the house unnoticed. He might have taken more than food. He might have found Daniel asleep, defenseless. The thought sent a chill down his spine. In the weeks that followed, Daniel doubled down on Kevin's care, upgrading his cage and spending extra hours talking to him, teaching him new words. The parrot, with his sharp wit and unyielding spirit, had become more than a link to his father. He was a guardian, a sentinel in feathers. Each night, as Daniel settled into the den, he'd glance at Kevin and feel a quiet gratitude. "You're my hero, buddy," he'd whisper, and Kevin would bob his head as if to say, "I know." Somewhere Daniel liked to think his father was watching, proud of the bird they'd both come to love. Story 2, The Voice in the Dark. Quinn Delaney was 17, a junior at Lincoln High in a sleepy Midwestern town where winters were long and wet, and the weight of family troubles could feel heavier than the gray skies overhead. He was a golden boy in his own right, captain of the varsity swim team, enrolled in every AP class his school offered, and a straight-A student who wore his exhaustion like a badge of honor. But beneath the polished exterior, Quinn was unraveling. His parents' divorce had fractured the family, leaving a void where stability once stood. His older brother Ethan had fled to college, and his younger brother Reese, a freshman swimmer with a sharp mind and a sharper tongue, was Quinn's only constant companion at home. The brothers were cut from the same cloth, but the stress of their broken family had driven a wedge between them. They bickered constantly, their words barbed with the kind of cruelty only siblings can wield. It was one of those dreary winter evenings, the kind where the rain seemed to seep into your bones. Quinn had just returned from a grueling swim practice, his muscles aching, his mind numb from the monotony of laps. He dropped his swim bag by the front door of their two-story middle-class home, the silence of the empty house greeting him like an old friend. His father was out, likely at Reese's club swim practice, which always followed the high school team's slot at the community pool. Quinn grabbed a handful of Cheez-Its from the kitchen, the salty crunch a small comfort, and headed to the basement, what he called his office. The basement was a relic of his father's past career as a remote consultant. Unfinished concrete floors stretched beneath a patchwork of carpet samples, and exposed beams loomed overhead. But at the far end was a single finished room, a haven of order amidst the chaos. Quinn had claimed it as his own, filling it with a desk, a computer, and shelves of books he rarely had time to read. His family called it Quinn's office, a nod to his relentless work ethic. Tonight he settled in to tackle an essay for his AP literature class, a dry analysis of hedonism in the picture of Dorian Gray. The topic felt like a cruel joke. Pleasure was a foreign concept to a kid juggling school, sports, and a family in freefall. For an hour, Quinn typed, the glow of the computer screen casting harsh shadows across the room. The CFL bulb overhead buzzed faintly, its cold light doing little to warm the space. He was deep in a paragraph, wrestling with words that refused to flow, when a voice cut through the silence. "Quinny! Quinny, come up!" It was Reese, his tone sing-song, almost playful. Quinn's first instinct was annoyance. "Reese, I'm working!" he shouted back, his voice echoing off the concrete. "What do you need?" No answer came. Quinn frowned, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. He hadn't heard the front door, hadn't heard the familiar thud of Reese's swim bag or the creak of the stairs. His brother should still be at practice. Minutes passed and Quinn tried to refocus, but the unease lingered. Then it came again, that same voice lilting through the darkness. "Quinny! Quinny, come up!" This time the hairs on Quinn's neck prickled. He called out again, sharper now. "Reese, what's going on? You okay?" Silence. The basement felt colder, the shadows deeper. Quinn's mind raced. Reese wasn't home. He couldn't be. There were no shoes by the door, no backpack, no car in the driveway. His father wouldn't be back for at least another hour. So who was calling him? Reluctantly, Quinn pushed back his chair and stood, the scrape of wood against concrete unnervingly loud. He grabbed a flashlight from the desk, its beam a weak defense against the creeping dread. He crossed the basement, his footsteps deliberate, and climbed the stairs to the main floor. "Reese, I'm busy," he called, his voice wavering. "What's up?" He checked the kitchen, the living room, the hallway. No sign of his brother. The house was empty, the silence oppressive. He was about to head back downstairs when the voice rang out again, clearer this time, from the direction of the second floor. "Quinny! Quinny, come up!" Every nerve in Quinn's body screamed at him to stay put, but guilt tugged harder. The family was fragile, and if Reese needed him, if something was wrong, he couldn't ignore it. He moved to the base of the second floor staircase, the darkness above swallowing the light from the hall. "Reese, are you okay?" he called, his voice barely above a whisper. No answer. He waited, the silence stretching into something alive, something watching. Then softly, almost calmly, the voice spoke again. Not shouting, not singing, but steady and deliberate. "Quinny! Quinny, come up!" Quinn's breath caught. It was Reese's voice, but it wasn't. The cadence was wrong, the tone too measured, too cold. His mind scrambled for explanations. A prank, a neighbor, a break-in, but nothing fit. He took a step up the stairs, then another, his flashlight beam trembling as it swept the landing above. The house creaked, the wind rattling the windows, and Quinn's heart pounded so loudly he thought it might drown out the voice if it came again. He was halfway up when a new sound stopped him cold. The low, mechanical hum of the garage door opening. Quinn bolted back down the stairs, nearly tripping in his haste. He reached the front window just in time to see his father's sedan pull into the driveway. The car doors opened, and there they were. His father, weary from a long day, and Reese, his swim bag slung over his shoulder, his hair still damp from practice. Quinn stumbled to the hallway, his legs weak, his mind reeling. As his father and brother stepped inside, they found him slumped against the wall, tears streaming down his face, his breath coming in ragged gasps. "Quinn, what's wrong?" his father asked, alarmed. But Quinn couldn't answer. He couldn't explain the voice, the fear, the certainty that something had been in the house, calling him, luring him. For weeks, he avoided the second floor at night, sleeping with his door locked, his flashlight closed. He and Reese never spoke of it, their fragile truce holding despite the distance between them. But Quinn never forgot the voice, the way it had mimicked his brother so perfectly, yet felt so wrong. And though he'd never admit it, he sometimes wondered if the house, stained by the sorrow of their broken family, had found a way to speak. Story 3. The Abandoned Colony. 15 years ago, in the fading light of a summer evening in upstate New York, two teenage boys stood at the edge of adventure and fear. Caleb, a lanky kid with a mop of dark hair and a restless spirit, and his best friend Jackson, stockier and more cautious, had stumbled upon a relic of a bygone era, an abandoned bungalow colony off Route 209. They'd first spotted it weeks earlier, walking the main road under the blistering July sun, the overgrown driveway snaking into the woods like an invitation to a forgotten world. That day they'd hesitated, wary of trespassing charges, but curiosity gnawed at them. And tonight, with the sun dipping below the horizon, they returned, armed with flashlights, walkie-talkies, and the reckless courage of youth. The colony was a sprawling ghost town, its once vibrant grounds choked by tall grass and creeping vines. 10 small bungalows stood in uneven rows, their paint peeling, their windows clouded with grime. A main hall loomed at the center, its doors locked tight, its purpose lost to time. Nearby were bathroom stations, their signs faded to illegibility, and a pool house, its indoor pool long drained, its tiles cracked and moss-covered. An outdoor pool sat stagnant, its surface a mirror for the darkening sky, and a playground, with rusted swings and a splintered slide, whispered of children long gone. The air was thick with the scent of decay, rotting wood, damp earth, and something sharper, unplaceable. Caleb and Jackson moved together at first, their flashlights cutting through the twilight as they explored the bungalows. Each was a time capsule, sagging beds with moth-eaten blankets, kitchens with rusted sinks, bathrooms where mirrors reflected only shadows. Some had tiny living rooms, their furniture shrouded in dust, as if the occupants had simply walked away one day. The boys whispered over their walkie-talkies, their voices low, half expecting a security guard or a vagrant to emerge from the gloom. But the colony was silent, its only sounds the rustle of leaves and the distant hoot of an owl. Halfway through the bungalows, Caleb grew impatient. Jackson was lingering, peering into corners with a caution Caleb found maddening. "I'm checking the main hall," Caleb said, splitting off before Jackson could protest. He jogged to the larger building, its silhouette ominous against the deepening night. Every door was locked, the windows boarded or too grimy to see through. He pressed his walkie-talkie. "Jackson, the big building's a bust, all locked up." Static crackled, but no reply came. Caleb frowned, wondering if he'd strayed too far. He moved on, his flashlight beam bouncing across the uneven ground. Minutes later, he reached one of the bathroom stations, a squat, 400-square-foot structure with no doors, just two open entrances, one marked for men, the other for women. The signs were barely legible, their paint flaking away. Caleb hesitated, the darkness inside the building absolute, swallowing his flashlight's beam. Then he saw them. Red tracks on the concrete floor, smeared and uneven, leading into the women's room. They weren't clearly footprints, but their color, dark, almost crimson, sent a jolt of unease through him. Paint? Rust? Blood? His mind raced, unable to settle on an answer. The air felt heavier here, the silence oppressive. Caleb raised his walkie-talkie. "Yo, Jackson, where are you?" He released the button, and a faint beep echoed from inside the bathroom, sharp and close. His heart lurched. Jackson's walkie-talkie was in there. Was he playing a prank? Caleb called his name, his voice echoing into the void. No answer. He took a step toward the entrance, his flashlight trembling, when a shout broke the silence. Jackson's voice, not from the bathroom, but from the darkness outside. "Caleb!" it called, growing closer. Caleb spun around, relief flooding him as he spotted Jackson's silhouette stumbling across the field, his flashlight bobbing. "I found your walkie-talkie," Caleb yelled, but Jackson's response stopped him cold. "Don't go in there! I never went in there!" Caleb's blood ran cold. He pressed the walkie-talkie button again. A quick tap, and the beep sounded once more from the pitch-black women's room. His eyes met Jackson's, and in that half second, they understood. Someone, or something else was in there, holding Jackson's walkie-talkie. Without a word, they turned and ran, their flashlights bouncing wildly as they tore through the tall grass, past the bungalows and back to the dirt driveway. They didn't stop until they reached Route 209, collapsing onto the pavement, their breaths ragged, their hearts pounding. Gasping, Jackson told his story. He'd been in one of the bungalows alone when he tried to radio Caleb. No answer came, likely because they were out of range. Then he'd heard a noise, a shuffle, then footsteps from the bungalow's tiny living room. He'd swung his flashlight around, and there she was. An older woman, her face gaunt, her eyes wild, charging toward him with unnatural speed. Jackson had dropped his flashlight and walkie-talkie, sprinting into the night. He'd hidden in the grass, barely breathing, until he'd seen Caleb's light near the bathrooms. The woman, he was sure, had taken his walkie-talkie. But why was she in the bathroom? And what were those red tracks? Caleb's mind churned. The rational explanation was a squatter, maybe a drug addict, living in the abandoned colony. She'd seen Jackson, lunged at him, picked up his walkie-talkie. The red tracks could be paint, or spilled food, or something innocuous. But the pieces didn't fit neatly. Why the bathroom? Why the silence? And why had the walkie-talkie beeped only when Caleb was steps from entering? The boys never returned to the colony, never spoke of it to anyone but each other. But the memory lingered, a shadow that followed Caleb into adulthood, a reminder that some places hold secrets too dark to unravel.